Ladies and gentlemen, hello. Welcome to the R3 podcast, episode number 3 with Lorna Feeney at Marsh, who are a global leader in insurance broking and innovative risk management solutions. They help clients quantify and manage risk and help them unlock new opportunities for growth. I'm your host, Ben Luxford. For those of you who don't know me, I am R3's technical manager. And before I joined R3, I worked for various firms for a number of years in the insolvency and restructuring profession. R3 is the association for the UK's insolvency, restructuring, advisory and turnaround professionals. We represent licensed insolvency practitioners, lawyers, turnaround and restructuring experts, students and others in the profession. Our members work across the spectrum of the profession, from global legal and accountancy firms through to smaller local practices. The R3 podcast aims to draw on the skills and knowledge of our network of professionals and to deliver more content to members to ensure R3 continues to support the development of insolvency and restructuring professionals across the UK and beyond. Today's episode is a follow-up really to a recent webinar R3 produced on mental health, and it intends to focus on what can be done to promote a healthy and happy workforce. As mentioned, I'm joined today by Lorna Feeney. Lorna is a qualified clinical hypnotherapist practitioner, mental health first aid instructor, and head of mental health risk management for Marsh. After experiencing a mental health illness, Lorna chose to dedicate herself to supporting organisations in raising awareness of mental health. She is passionate about the role organisations can play in preventing mental health difficulties. Utilising her own and others' experiences, Lorna provides a unique and people-centred approach to help organisations navigate mental health and well-being matters. Like with all podcasts, it is important to stress that whilst care has been taken in the preparation of this podcast, it is intended for general guidance only and does not constitute legal advice. Let's begin. Before the global pandemic, organisations were facing an increased focus on mental health and well-being from government, regulatory and media sources. Now we are in the pandemic, the focus has increased tenfold and has become a priority for organisations. During my career, I've often encountered anxiety and self-confidence issues, so I was pleased R3 produced a webinar titled The Healthy, Happy Workplace. Is your organisation suitably protecting employee mental health and well-being? Which is available on the R3 website. The presenter of the webinar was Lorna Feeney, who provided an overview of the expectation of employers and what can be done to promote a healthy and happy workforce and comply with the duty of care towards employees. As the webinar was that good, I asked Lorna to be a guest on the podcast. So welcome, Lorna. How are you doing?
I'm very well, Ben, thank you. Very, very well. How are you?
I'm not too bad. I've come to the conclusion that I need to brighten up my spare room because the white walls are now driving me mad. So that will be my project over the next week or so.
Something to focus be really, really good for you to do.
Yes. So let's just get straight into it, really. So why is an employee's mental health important?
So, from my point of view, mental health is something that we all have. Mental ill health is something different. When our mental health is good, we have a sense of purpose, we have direction, and feel that we can cope with whatever life and work throws at us. But just as our physical health varies, so too much our mental health goes through ups and downs. I refer this as a roller coaster, as Ronan Keating says sometimes, with your Titan ride it. That's, how I look at it. So, raising awareness of potential mental health issues in the workplace is part of fostering an inclusive workplace where people feel they're able to bring the whole selves to work. The uncertainty and concern around our current situation that we're in and the longer term outlook has generated a whole mix of emotions and related physical symptoms. So for many, this extended period of isolation and lack of contact has unfortunately created anxiety, stress, boredom and highlighting of underlying conditions that previously were manageable. With businesses operating differently, and approximately, I read the other day, of 6.5 million workers furloughed, the strain is also taking its toll on the workers who are still present, who are still holding the fort. Those extra tasks and responsibilities, and in some instances, where pay has been cut. So the overarching understanding of the need to sustain businesses for the short term is very apparent, however, risking the mental well-being of those who do remain at work. So we've got quite a lot to look at. But what we need to understand is that, at least 1 in 4 people will experience a mental health illness within 12 months. But this was before COVID. So that's 25% of your workforce. But now it has increased from 25% to 62%, an increase of 37%. Yes, so it's huge. And unfortunately, suicide has increased by 200% since the start of COVID. And it's my belief that I think the mental health illness conditions is going to really accelerate further than we did have with COVID. And this is what the professionals are saying now too. But see, having good mental health, it enables us to thrive. We're more alert, less prone to accidents and near misses. We're more productive and creative. So having a mentally healthy workforce will help to decrease absenteeism, presenteeism, where you're at work, but your mind's not there, high stress levels, grievances, reduce the risk of employment liability claims, so you've got the claims defensibility side, help protect your brand and reputation, which is really important, attract new talent and retain it, increase morale, motivation and trust, all which will have ultimately a positive impact on the bottom line, as well as it's morally right thing to do. But there's also the legal element as well. So, we have the Health and Safety at Work Act 1974, Section 2, which always states duty of every employer to ensure so far reasonably practicable the health and safety welfare at work of all employees. So there is legislation around this, and HSE are more than ever now getting involved. Again, they have just been driven momentum over the last 2 years. They've really been driving this as pressure has been putting on, and as they've actually seen that accidents have actually decreased in the workplace by just people putting a mental health framework in the business.
You mentioned pressure there. So where is that pressure coming from? Because it's very much in the public eye at the moment, mental health. Has that pressure been building up over years? Where has it come from?
The landscape's definitely changing. And I think as suicides are increasing and we're having more suicides and road traffic accidents and fire fatalities, it needs to be looked into. So, and I think this is where they've been taking things seriously. But there was a case, France Telecommunications Company, and it came to a head in December 2019, where the CEO, director, and HR director were all charged under psychological harassment, so basically bullying harassment. And it's since then that the HSE have actually really looked into if there's any reported of work-related stress cases, where there is work-related stress policies that people should adhere to, and they should be able to demonstrate that they are looking after that. But the HSE now are looking into actually, well, how are you looking after it, and really spot checking on businesses if they're having more than one bullying harassment case, work-related stress, which will come to that, looking at them to say, what are you putting in place to look after your employees? So, it's definitely building and building and building, but I think the driver of this is the amount of fatalities due to suicide, unfortunately.
That's very sad to hear. How can an employer tell if someone is suffering, and how key is early intervention?
Yeah, so it's about knowing your team, your colleagues, and also it's not just at work, it's your family and friends. Spotting the signs of someone starting with mental health illness can make an enormous difference to their health and their lives. Often people do see differences in people. They may recognise that a colleague, friend, family member has started to become withdrawn or lost in thoughts, unusually snappy, agitated, being erratic, tearful or emotionless, maybe tired. Losing sense of humour is a big one too, complaining of headaches or stomach aches. But more often than not, people may notice but do not feel equipped of having a conversation with them to highlight this, because they may not know how to start the conversation. They may not know how to respond if they tell them if they are feeling suicidal. They may feel that the person may be, if they speak to them, that they may be judging them or interfering, and actually don't know what to say to help them to get better either. So it's quite a lot of pressure on that individual who hasn't been trained in any way to notice these signs, and they notice that the person who they know there's an absolute change in their behaviour, their appearance, or physically, mentally, but they don't know what to do. So this is why lots of things get left unsaid. But it's why it's really important that the early intervention is by training, say, line managers or other members of the team and the workforce to spot signs and have the skill set to have a conversation, to be able to signpost them to a GP or to the EAP if that's what you have. You can help that person with faster recovery. Like any physical illness, the quicker it's dealt with, the higher chance of making a full recovery. So again, we need to look at what do we do with a physical illness. It's the same as we do with a mental health illness. But we're quite quick to pick up on a physical illness because we can see it and we can feel it, and we can take ourselves off to our doctors. We know what to do if we have a cold. We might have a couple of days off work, take some paracetamol, Beechams. But if it gets worse, we'll just take ourselves off. But that's because we know how to deal with it. There's just not enough education for an individual or for other people to know when a mental health illness is starting, to when do they go to the doctors. But earlier the better for a full recovery and a faster recovery.
Certainly. So how can an organisation assess the risk?
So lots of things we can do. So assess the risk. Employers need to consider work factors that could cause psychological harm, such as high workload, lack of flexibility and lack of training. The HSE management standards set out 6 key areas, which are the demands, the controls, support, relationships, role and change. These, if not managed effectively, can lead to poor health, both physical and psychological, reduced productivity and increased sickness absence. Using the classic 5 steps to risk assessment, the management standards aid is identifying the hazards within an organisation. So identifying problem areas using existing data and employee surveys helps to establish who might be at harm and how, and evaluating the risk identified. Employers can link problems to solutions, provide feedback, address individual concerns. At the record findings stage, employers can develop an action plan to implement, monitoring and reviewing outcomes. Will aid in understanding how effectively the action plan is working and risks are being controlled. But the HSE also recommend that using the Thriving at Work report, which was a Government Commission report 2017, by implementing 6 core standards. So to produce, implement and communicate a mental health work at plans. So it's a little bit more around mental health as opposed to work-related stress, but develop mental health awareness amongst employees to encourage open conversations about mental health, support available when employees are struggling, to provide employees with good working conditions and ensure they have healthy work-life balance and opportunities for development, which is really important, to promote effective people management through line managers and supervisors, and to routinely monitor employee mental health and well-being. So it's great doing all this work, but the most important thing for me is being able to routinely monitor it and to make sure that everybody is okay. We know that we've got the services, the EAP, but actually how many people are using it and is it being effective? Always make sure that you're checking to see that all of the great stuff a business has been doing is actually being used. But if you have more than 500 employees, there's another 4 optional core standards. But remember, we have to respect employees' confidentiality, so we have to involve them. So as well as employee safety representatives, make sure that we involve the whole of the business really into making it a mentally healthy workplace.
About a few weeks ago, R3 presented a webinar on the farming industry, and I did not realise the high number of suicides in that particular industry and the mental health suffering of farmers, basically, because you don't realise most farmers are on their own during the day, tending to their animals and stuff. It was really shocking to hear that. Is there any other sort of industries that suffer most?
The thing is, I don't feel this is the right way of viewing it by industry because it doesn't give a fair reputation of the industry, as mental illness is different for each individual, so the same as physical. But we know that 75% men take their own lives to 25% women in suicide, and men aged between 40 to 49 is the biggest killer. So irrespective of the industry, if you've got a male-dominated industry, then you would think, going on suicide figures, that actually construction and manufacturing and mechanics is probably a high end, like you said, farming. But when you look at the farming, the reason for that is because it's more of a lonely sort of their work alone. And lorry driving, again, they're lone drivers as well. However, we do have high pressure jobs such as lawyers and accountants, you see, so they suffer from work related stress. And other jobs such as retail and manufacturing tend to suffer depression, but that's due to low pay and monotonous work. So there's different contributing factors depending on industry of what type of mental health illness and condition you have. The same with physical industry, you might have a lot more back pain because people are doing more heavy lifting. I think, when they do say which industries suffer, I do question that because I think it depends on lots of different circumstances.
No, it's a very good point. That's a very good point. So during the webinar you presented, one of the things you mentioned that really stood out to me was openness. Yeah. I recall reading an article whereby an employee called his boss, his superior, and said, "I'm feeling mentally drained, overwhelmed at the moment, and won't be in the office today. I need a day to reset." The boss was initially shocked, but then proceeded to applaud the employee for making her aware of how he was feeling and wished him better. The next day, the boss spoke to the employee and discussed the reason for feeling drained and worked out a solution best for the employee and the employer. I think if one is mentally suffering, it is much easier to say, "I have a stomach bug, I won't be in today." People can relate to a physical illness or feeling unwell. I think we've touched upon this earlier, but what are your thoughts on this? Should employers encourage more openness? How can they go about doing this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, by encouraging an open culture, you're able to get to the root of the problem rather than try and treat the symptoms, which you may never ever be able to do. And you would be able to talk to them and ask them what would help. perhaps a court, perhaps, they may not know about the employee assisted program. You can do as much communication in your business about things. And I am a massive advocate in my business, and still now people don't know what our employee assisted program is. But if they knew that they've got a free counsellor in line, they may have just rang them. So it may be that their anxiety may be that high that they don't want to work in the office, but they're still able to do the job, but they just feel as if they just can't cope with the drive into work, or being surrounded by people, or working from home once a week might be a solution for them. And being able to be introduced flexible working and having an open culture, that they're able to have a type of conversation with a fear of being judged. So that was a very brave thing to do, of that employee, to be able to say how they're feeling and actually tell the truth around it, because often a lot of people do mask with a headache and stomach ache, and really there's not a lot we can do about that. But if it is something else which is longer term, then actually there's a lot more a business can do if they know about it, but they don't have to declare it either.
Yeah, if someone's more open, then best, because then the employee and employer can work out a solution best for both.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it would just linger.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so we need to mention the current normal. Working from home. This is new to some, me in particular. Before lockdown, I was very much, my home is my home, the office is work. It's very simple for me. But lockdown certainly changed this. Initially, the change was fine. I just got on with it. Although a newborn baby at the start of lockdown was an addition. Do you have any tips on how to manage this new normal? For me, I now take regular breaks. I go outside for some air. I have water cooler chats with my 3-year-old. So I treat as my home as I would do in the office. I go make a tea. I go outside. Is there any tips that you can give people?
Well, I think, like for you, it's been tricky for a lot of people, especially if people have limited space too, as well as a young family. I was speaking to somebody who lived in shared accommodation, and everyone is in the same home, and especially with lockdown, we all had to stay in. There's nowhere they could have meetings. For me, trying to stick to as many daily routines as possible. Here's a very simple tip for a very crucial one, but getting dressed, even in office work, can help your mindset and focus. Then change out of it when you finish work. Your workspace, you may not have the luxury of an office at home, but try and make somewhere that feels separate from the rest of your home. Make your workspace comfortable and ensure that you take those breaks, like you've just said, which is brilliant. The key is as well, communicate with your line manager. We're all in this together, as we've all been thrown into this. So they're going to understand, especially if you tell them, you've got a small family. It's quite difficult to actually do the traditional 9 till 5 and come up with some flexible working. So perhaps it's better for you to work 7 till 10, then be able to answer calls through the day, but then pick work back up later in the evening. But make sure you enjoy your free time and your hours in the day with your children. And then later on, it's about being sensible as well. My line manager said to me, your home was a home before it was an office, and we understand that because I'm a single parent with my daughter, and it's been pretty testing, especially when she barges through the door and on the Zoom calls. But in reality, just getting the balance right is quite tricky, and we really need to say what works for us, what works for me, what works for the family, what works for the business as well.
Yeah.
And by making little changes, actually, being able to talk it through with your boss, even the small changes, doing the small steps, tiniest changes to routine can make the biggest difference to you, your family, and to work. And I think sometimes people feel as if they need to be at this level, but we're in it, as well as having the worry of what's going on with the pandemic as well. Yeah. We've got all of these extra contributing factors that nobody has been in their lifetime ever been in this position. So be open and honest as much as you can, and seeing what you can do would be the best thing. And our business has been quite good, actually. We've had a 10% people coming back to the business every month, and they sent out a survey asking people why they want to be the first to come back in the office, if you want to come back in the office, if you haven't, and if you have, what the reasons. So they try to prioritise it on actually people rather than job function. We're quite lucky that we've been able to, and not every business are lucky to be able to do that, depending on what industry it is. So we've prioritised the people who haven't got anybody at home, who are very lonely, who are really feeling the connection, and they're not having that where they've gone to work and that's the only people that they see as a priority, and that's how we've gone with it. And it seems to be working quite well. And then at the end of the scale, the last 10% will be the people who've lived in that bubble, who've not come out of the house for the whole 3-4 months, however long it's been now. They're quite anxious about coming out of that. And we may put places where they might want to come in once a week, but we know that they can work productively well in the home. So it's just being sensible about it.
Great. So thank you for speaking today, Lorna. I've certainly learned a lot, and mental health is certainly important, and not only in these times. And with all guests on the R3 podcast, I ask this question. What is the one thing you have learned during your career so far that has stayed with you throughout?
Ooh, Ben, that's a tough one. Okay, let me think. So, my reason for doing this career is actually driven by wanting to make a difference in our massive world. And I'm not the most polished presenter, I would say, a person. And even though I have been on lots of different professional speaking courses, and I've sat for hours trying to memorize, big and clever words so I can deliver to the best of the ability, I feel as if, and I've learned this by not being my true self, not being my authentic self, it doesn't actually get the message across. When I talk from the heart and I have oodles of passion, I deliver it in a unique way. All my training courses and my presentations, and I connect with people. And in my business, in the corporate world, there are lots of very, very, amazing presenters, articulate very, very well. And I get a little bit, my confidence gets knocked about that. But actually, I'm always the one who people approach at the end, who ask me lots of questions. And my boss said, because it's fine to be different. Your uniqueness, when you do this, you're getting a different message across, he said. So, don't worry, don't compare yourself, really. And I think that was just me being hard on myself. So that's been a massive believing in myself. And I do want to make a difference as much as I can. And that's why I chose to work in the biggest insurance global broker in the world, because I figured that, we have so many massive clients that if I can make an impact on people's lives, where better to be able to do that, to be able to deliver mental health training, to be able to present on actually, businesses, what we can do to help. So yes, so just follow your path, follow your passion, and I'm definitely where I should be. So hopefully that's answered that.
Do you know what? I absolutely love that. I mean, I totally agree. You just got to be yourself. You can't be anyone else. Because when I started this podcast, I mean, we're only the third episode in, but I was very nervous before we started recording. Like, how do I present? Who do I be like? And I think it was my director, Caroline. She said, just be yourself.
Yeah.
And that is all you can be. Okay, it's not going to be the finished product. I mean, I'm only on the third episode, but the more I do, the more experience I get. Hopefully, it will get better and better.
Yeah.
So, but I think the key bit is, like you say, be true to yourself. Be you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So no, I love that. So thank you very much, Lorna.
You are very, very welcome. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. I've really enjoyed that. I wish you a good day, and I'll speak to you soon.
Yes, thank you, Ben. Thank you. You too.
Thank you for listening to episode 3 of the R3 podcast. We hope you found the discussion informative and useful. As mentioned at the beginning, we are in a pandemic, and therefore the focus on mental health has increased tenfold. In my opinion, it is key for employers to encourage openness from their members of staff, as this will be vital to promote a happy and healthy workplace. I wish to thank Lorna again and thank everyone who has taken the time to listen. I'm in the recording studio again next week to record an episode with Rachel Grant at Manolete Partners. Rachel is also a member of R3's Scottish Technical Committee. And when I say recording studio, I do mean my bedroom. Not with Rachel. Our recordings are done via Microsoft Teams at the moment, just to let you know. Should any members wish to be a guest on the R3 podcast, please contact me. My contact details are on the R3 website, or you can simply message me on LinkedIn. Stay safe.